Hey there, everyone. Thank you for opportunity to be here and present our experience, what we had in not so far from Estonia. It's just 7 hours from my home, so it's basically even 4 hours to some location where we had working with wind farms. So I will try to tell the story about ourselves, and I'm here from Klaipeda University, but the main activities is done through the Coastal Research and Planning Institute. Earlier it was as a division of university, but then it's separated, and we have independent consultancy or consultancy based on the non-profit organization. So it's we based in Klaipeda, and I will tell the stories how we began, what we done, and what is our experience. Just shortly, I will introduce myself, who I am, and from where I come. So first experience, my experience started in 2009 with field observers, as a field observer in the Planet wind farms in Lithuania. And then slowly we developed a little bit, and after 6 years we saw that we need some kind of regulation for the conflicts, that we do this environmental impact assessments and monitoring on the basis on the regular screening and legislation. But it didn't stop. We went through, and the wind farms started to be larger and larger, and we have EAA decisions for 60 VTGs, 98 VTGs in 2023. In 2023, we got the first decision of the offshore wind farm. And as projects get larger, we engaged with the foreign partners, with the German partner for the offshore monitoring and now onshore. And in the recent years, we started to work with the EFC standards-based monitoring. So it's the International Finance Corporation. So if it's not here, it will be here very soon. And they have very clear regulation what is there. And our team started as beginning 2 persons, and now we have around 35, 40 persons doing monitoring, analysis, and reporting. But how it looks like on the framework of the development and regulation, it's always you have to be on the top with the information and what is there and what you're missing. So we have separated strictly the people in the office. They're a bit disappointed. They don't see a lot of nice countryside, but we have a team of 30, 40 people running, mostly like freelancers in the field, collecting the data. And we have regular contacts with them, updates, what is necessary, and so on. So like I introduced in Lithuania until 2017-18, we had just the standard environmental impact assessment legislation. So it's changed according to the other legislation, regulation, but mostly all the regulations, all the evaluation was done this time like that. And looking back 10 years, 15 years ago, and it is really funny to see, for example, the bat assessment was done and the report was accepted if you write that there is no official data about the bats in that area, and there is wintering this and that number of bats in Lithuania, and the total number of bats is 14 species in Lithuania, and that was sufficient 15 years ago. But looking to the data, what we're collecting now, we see that we evaluated a lot, not evaluated, but developed a lot. And then we saw that the wind is not stopping, and it's getting larger and larger. Lots of investment, foreign investors from Denmark, from Estonia, even from Latvia is coming to our country. Our own wind farm owners, they are building, planning more and more, and we saw that this it's not structurized, and it need to be somehow had some regulations how to deal that and how to. So had a project called WINDBIS, so it's acronym of the Wind Energy and Sensitive Areas Evaluations, so I will introduce a bit later. But even that, there was a plan based on that project outcomes to have official legislation that would be used for the wind and renewable structures, but it never became an official, it was like unofficial. And then from 2023, we forced our agencies and not developers, but agency that we need some kind of regulation. So we had official legislation from 2023, but that document was prepared for 2 years. But as you will see later, it was changed a lot. So the main institution who is making decision based on the biodiversity and environment in Lithuania is Lithuanian Environmental Protection Agency and State Protection Protected Areas Service under Ministry of Environment. So the main decision is made by Environmental Agency, but a lot of support is coming from the Protected Area Service, and sometimes their decision influence larger authorities. And during that project, we had assessed the already existing wind farms. We collected the data, what was already known, 6-7 years of operation. Then we looked at all the database, what was existing, what was the plans for the development, but mostly we looked on the data and collected the new data for preparation of the sensitivity mapping as a tool where the investor can go and look for the areas, what is the conflict, and with the main risk species, so it's the animal groups, it's birds and bats. Also, we take account to the Natura 2000 national protected areas, EB, international bird protected areas, and we prepared the standards, recommendations for the evaluation, for the screening process, and this was the aim. So we came out with the map of Lithuania, of the areas mostly sensitive, medium sensitive and less sensitive areas, and then the majority areas still we didn't cover. It was this pinkish color that is there is not enough data to evaluate the sensitivity. And each user can go online. This map still existing, but after 10 years, it's definitely need to be updated a lot. We've spent a lot of time collecting the data, but it's already quite old. And if you go, there is a squares of 500 meters on 500 meters, and if you push, make a click on the square, you can have the why it's one or another color, for example, in this. And we have a scale, a points that was like a sensitivity scaling for these areas. And in that area, yeah, from the number of points, you can see the color. And in that case, this area was red because of the black stork and leather-spotted eagle nesting somewhere close by. So it was not pointing the direct nest. And the outcome was these maps, a lot of reports, recommendation, assessments, what had been done, what is now, what you need in the future, etc., etc. And this was unofficial, like the project outcomes, but the authorities, it was a guidance for the authorities to use, and for the assessment makers was as a tool to run this as a guidance also. But then there was a lot of arguing and questions, what about that and that. So the main thing what we are looking is the collision, habitat, displacement from the habitat, barrier effect, changing of the migration route, habitat impact, fragmentation, landscape, and etc. So who is working, you all know this very well. And the most important thing is the location and the location. So if you have a good location, you have minimizing a lot of negative impact, and you can have a larger yield later without investments to the mitigation measures. So, how how it was. So first guidance, like I said, existed for almost 5 years. There was a recommendation, there was this sensitive areas map, etc. for the but it was not officially adopted. So lots of questions was raising how to implement that in the official legislation. Lots of gray zone in this legislation, and one developer can say that it's important, another can say that this is not important, and so it was lots of questions, and then from 2020 we started to prepare a new official guidance. So because it was changes of the government, etc., and there was already officially approved and signed by Minister of Environment, detailed description of the criteria for the significant negative impact on the wind farms, birds and bats, the application of the research requirements for the prevention and for the screening, for the environmental impact assessment. But also during this first version we had not clear about there was misunderstanding about the impact zones, like what is the distance from the nest of the black stork could be significant impact. There was a phrase that it might be significant up to 3 kilometers, and that each evaluator had his own opinion. One said that significant is 1 kilometer, another said 2 kilometers, and the third one said 3 kilometers. It's significant. What that word might feel. And then there was lacking of thresholds for the collision of number of bats. And then suddenly there was a change of the ministry cabinet, and almost on the last day there was a change of the legislation before the leaving. One minister leaving and then the news coming. The guidance was already under revision, and then suddenly, surprisingly, one day it was signed by another minister, and he's leaving after 5 days, the minister. So we got a new update in 2024. So it was signed in 23, but started operation in 24. So they made this more clear definition of the impact zones, and this white stork, for example, area of 3 kilometers, it was narrowed, for example, it's just an example, like 2 kilometers significant impact, and the VTG should not operate half year during the breeding season. And at 1 kilometer, you can operate with the additional technological mitigation measures. But there still was, as it was on rush, they left this no thresholds for the bats, and there was still lots of mistakes in that legislation. So from 2024, we're working with this legislation, and it's still not approved. And I got message last week that it should be approved, it should be under official revision on the documents this week. It was being working group, I'm part of that, was working on that document almost a year again. Different parties from authorities, from the State Protected Service, from the developers, and from the field investigators. So it was more, as the previous version was made a bit better for the investors, but maybe on the price of the nature. So some of the zones was also again enlarged up to maximum 3.5 kilometers. This is might significant impact zones. I will go later on them a bit more detail. Then the investigation scope period for the environmental impact assessment was the same, but the main changes was on the post-construction monitoring, that reduced the monitoring for post-construction, most just for the carcass search. It still has lots of unclear areas with the implementation of legislation, where one stage is ending, one stage where is starting. For example, the planning stage for us and the construction phase and the planning stage for the developers is totally two different periods, and until you have to have the permission, it is already you can start to build, or you have to wait until you do the monitoring. So it's still a lot of questions which you find later, actually. So I hope we will have still comments for 2 weeks after it will be shown. Later, then, what is the significant impact is considered in this legislation for birds and bats? So in that legislation, we have like Natura 2000, important bird areas, is a significant importance areas for the bird species, so it's now building in these areas. Other protected areas like national or regional protection, according to EA collected important bird areas data, if it's large concentrations. Then we have also definition that 5 kilometers from the Baltic Sea coast and the Curonian Lagoon, eastern coast, where is the mostly occur the migration patterns of the migratory birds and bats. During the construction, it will be destroyed or damaged at protected areas like Natura 2000, Habitat Directive. At sea, it's 3% of the Habitat Directive areas destruction. So, and according to the Annex 2 from that legislation, for operational wind farms, there is a criteria how many birds it's not you allowed, but when you register this amount of collision, 1, 2, or 3 birds per different year, and the bad species, then the impact is also considered as a significant. And then there is, at sea, it's not relevant, but we somehow had to evaluate this impact on the staging birds, and its change of 20% during the 10-year annual fluctuation. And then one of the most important game changer was in this officially adopted legislation is the distance from the nests. If you do the proper census, you find the nests, and then is the distance, the minimum I think is 400 species for the list of the animals, up to 1.5 kilometers, it's depending on the species. That is the risk is considered important. And and then another element is that can be important that you can reduce with the additional mitigation measures. And what is determined? For example, if we had this distance for the white stork 400 meters, it should be considered as important negative impact. Then the other distance, for example, for other species, it's larger, but up to 400, from 401 meter to 1 kilometer, 1.5 kilometer, it considered it can be significant, but it should be controlled with the technological mitigation measures. And this was new in this last version that we're working now. So it means that you have these red zone and orange zone, and then the green zone, so 3 zones. Then the priority habitat under EU directive, coastline of from 5 to 15 kilometers. It was significant for 5, but up to 15 it might be significant, depends on your research, investigation. Migration routes, nocturnal roosting sites, or other flying corridors, it could be also significantly important. Then the research monitoring how it is planned for birds and bats. So aim is for the starting project, you have to do a full investigation, a full year, to locate the important feeding areas, breeding places of these animals group that you are looking for, usually birds and bats. Additionally, you might look on other species. Then the flight routes of them, is it corridors, places of accumulation, migration routes, territory of planet already operating VTG, so cumulative impact assessment, immediate or their immediate environment. So for the onshore, it's 1 year before the construction for the impact assessment data collection. Offshore, it's 2 years. Then post-operation is 3 years, and then each 1 year of the monitoring. So it looks more or less like that. If you start doing a screen environmental impact assessment, you should start, usually it's a full year, starting from the winter, finishing in the next winter, December, evaluating birds and bats, migration, wintering, breeding, and so on, all different sorts. The most intense work is spring, summer, and autumn, and the winter is but the winter like we had now, we have obligation to do a staging bird census once per month. So we had past winters totally different. Last one was very nice with the snow and there was almost no job, but the winter before we had full of open areas, water, etc., staging geese and swans, etc. So it's year from year difference, but you should have some definition. Then it could be a pre-construction monitoring if it's in the EAA decision and it's obligatory to implement if the agency made this clearly giving you agreement for the construction to make the wind farm. You have to do this 1 year of construction monitoring, and in Lithuania we have different regulation for the wind farms. If you build less than 6 VTGs, you don't have, at least by the environmental impact assessment, you're not obligatory to perform the full environmental impact assessment. So you can go through easier process of the screening, but then according to this legislation, you still have to do the 1 year of monitoring. And in that case, you do the screening without a proper data collection, but your information can be changed when you perform the full 1 year monitoring, and then you have the faster decision. But in the end, from your plan at 6 VTGs, it could be operating just 2, for example, because of the restriction of the wind of the nests of the birds of prey close by. But when you build wind farm, you have obligation of 3 year post-construction monitoring on the same amount what it was done before the during the screening period or during EAA. And then you have to repeat it once a year, each 5 years during the lifespan of wind farms. And if you have some impact issues or negative impact on birds or bats, if you're adopting some mitigation measures, these mitigation measures has to be verified by additional verification, so it's not enough just that I will be shut down in these VTGs and that's it, but you have to prove that your mitigation measures is working. So how this looks like in our legislation, so investigation plan for birds on I don't know which one. No, it's not. It's just point. It's not pointer. Huh? Is it? It is. But on this, I should be on the screen. Okay. So we have. Okay, it would be interesting. So we have a vantage points. And it's 40 hours per vantage points, and they should cover the entire wind farm and the plan of 1 kilometer. It's based on the visibility. If you are on the hill, you can cover more. If you're down, you need more. No obstructions like forest or something. If it's the forest in between of you and there's like another VTG in just another end of the forest, another vantage point should be in another end. So, and this is for collecting data of flying birds. So spring migration, autumn migration, and then we have this section of species of sensitive species. And we have a list of sensitive species, so mostly it's the birds of prey and gliding birds, storks, cranes, herons, and all the birds of prey mostly. Then we have breeding bird census. So I call common, but my colleagues say it's not common, it's just the birds. Mostly now in the existing legislation we have obligation to collect Lithuanian Red Book data and bird directive nesting species in the territory. So 3 counts in the March, June, and then we have sensitive breeding birds, mostly nests lacking places of capercaillie, for example. It's not so relevant in us, in our country it's almost gone, or it's just in very few locations. And these, if it's common birds, you have to do it in 2-kilometer buffer zone. If it's nesting these sensitive species, so you have to go to the maximum radius of this nest protection area, and it's 3.5-kilometer buffer zone. And then there is a resting bird census. In this case, you have to count each 10 days during March, October, and once per month during the winter period. I didn't put here, but if the wind farm is planned close to unfreezing water, for example, reservoir or a hydropower dam or a rubbish dump, more or less it's not so important now, but the migration flying routes should be done also during the winter time, because you have a higher chance to see them or to make the evaluation. There is another group of flying animals, it's bats, and we have a combination of permanent detectors and one-night standalone detectors. So mostly we are orientated on both breeding and migration. Spring migration, optional. We will start this week already. We will deploy the detectors, because we had experience from, well, usually if you look, I don't know how many of you are bat people here, not bad, but bat. Yeah, so it's could be more, this regulation was compiled based on the existing data. And there is no spring migration intents, there is that and that, there is mostly autumn migration, and all the focus should be on the autumn migration. But what we saw, that we have impact on bats in quite early in the spring. For example, in the end of March, we had the first collisions in the April. And usually if you look to the literature, don't start bat monitoring until the May, because there is nothing to do. So we will try to do this year a bit earlier. Then the main focus is the autumn migration, and the breeding bats from standalone detectors in the wind farms deployed in multiple places, or by hands going to the point, looking for the standing in a certain time for the bats. So as an example, a small wind farm of 5 wind turbines, and there is 6 vantage points around it. There is a 2-kilometer buffer zone for the common bird and flying common bird monitoring. And then there is a territory of 3.5 kilometers for search of the nest of sensitive species. And this is how it would be if we would get this project. But we didn't get this project, so I can show how nice it would be done, the monitoring. Then the bat monitoring. It's points for monitoring of bats, and it's one in the center, permanent bat monitoring. It's somewhere here, the deep orange, and then not so deep orange is one night monitoring. So this permanent, we usually record through the year from the beginning of the May till the end of October. And those also, they stand, but they like once per month during non-breeding season. So it's during breeding season and during migration each 5 days. So, and then when you start to collect data, and one of the values, one of the most significant values is this table, distance from the nest of the VTGs. We have a list of species, it's more than 40 species. And there is a distance, it's in Lithuanian, but so the first one is the species of animal, then is the period when the impact could be significant. So it's not all the time. And there is the daytime, night or day. This one, daytime also. And this is April 1st. This is Ciconia white stork, our national bird. And from 1st of April till the end of the August. And the first zone that is significant impact is 400 meters. So if you build VTG in the planning stage there, you should shut down it for that period for almost half of the year. Other case, if you build it from 401 meter, yeah, it's quite silly, 400 or 401, but there should be somewhere this division. I think it's no difference for the stork, but somewhere it is. And then the third group is for the species or from the areas that is considered as a sensitive species areas, protected areas for those. So yeah. So, and this yellow, it could be controlled with the technological mitigation measures, and how it looks after doing the surveys. You can see that some of the wind turbines are in the red, some of them are in the yellow. Another wind farm, it was planned all over, but after evaluation, what was the best, we managed to move all the wind turbines on the right side from the red zone. So one is the planet, another is already existing. And there is a bit different regulation. What is then when you have a wind farm and the bird starts to breed close to the VTG, and you have this obligation, and then it's not that so they choose that. So this is how to evaluate where to put the VTGs, and you can see different birds, different zones, and red and yellow. Red is no one will build in that zone first half year of the vacation of the VTG. Then another significant effect is when you have a collision of certain number of the birds in the area. And for the birds is collision from 1 to 25 birds per 1 year or per 3 years. For example, we have a value for 25, okay, it's somewhere there, third from the top, 25 cormorants per 1 year, for example. So it's the species-based, this criteria was taken from the how many birds, not can be, but it could be collisions. So it's made from the population levels and the natural mortality, etc. So it's different birds. It's the second part. You can see the numbering is different. So it's some of them 2 per 3 years, and the bats is 6 bats in 3 years or 2 bats per 2 years. Then it means that you have to take mitigation measures no matter where your VTG is located, in the green, yellow, or red zone. So the mitigation measures to prevent and eliminate damage of birds. So there is a list in avoid. The first one is in the planning, avoid impact, put in the good location. Mitigation should be implemented from being the construction through the lifespan of the VTG. If during the monitoring indicated larger impact than it was indicated, the measure should apply, eliminate, or to reduce the impact. So, and the regular monitoring should persist of the lifespan of the VTGs. And data collection, so requirements for there is also in the legislation requirements for the experience. It should be collected on the GIS-based systems, so requirements for the analysis, experience for who is analyzing the data. Now we have issues with some investigators with the proofs that they did this and that investigation properly. So in the new legislation, we added a new section of the proofs that if your investigation looks suspicious, you have to provide the proofs of with the photo fixation of or GPS tracks of your done work and skilled experience and analysis. A monitoring of how it's done, this collision monitoring. We have obligation now to search under each VTG if it's been found smaller than 50 VTGs. If it's larger, so it's 80% of selected VTGs. Because it's just the human resource. And then the search zone is the height to the nacelle. Now we have obligation from March to October each 5 days, but it is proposed in the new legislation each 7 days all year around. So it's basically we have the same 50, 52 search a year. We still now have but it will not be probably. In the new legislation, scavengers efficiency trials, person searchers efficiency evaluation, and test of predation and efficiency searchers twice per year. So this gives you an understanding how much this can be, what we found and what exactly could be there under VTG. So basically, collision calculation. So we do the searcher's efficiency predator. So we count twice per year. So we do a carcass. We put the carcass around. Then the regular searcher is going in the circles. You can see them. And there, if he finds that body, he marks that. He checks that each day or each 2 days, is it still there? And then he marks when it's not there. So we can get evaluation for large and small animals. And so what we found under VTG, so it's different animals, different birds, so it's just one example, but last year we did monitoring under 115 VTGs. And so it's lots of small common birds. You can see the skylark #1, then the common swift, gray-tit, and there's white stork, marsh harrier, common buzzard, these large sensitive birds. And then we can see lots of, not a lot, but 27 bats, for example. So we have an obligation to search under this yellow zone, and if we find, we make a point. It's easier for the observers to walk on this zone, so we make like a map. And then where we find these animals, lots of this walking is just doesn't make sense, because later in the season, vegetation grows like that, and the rape is like this height. I was walking in the field of yellow rape like this, so you cannot go forest, wetlands, etc. And this is just a table showing a graph actually when it's very good visibility, like road or closed or construction site of the VTG. This is short grass or overgrown road, and this is average visibility and poor visibility. How many of these animals are found in different vegetation levels? So even if you go to outside, you can walk until you will step on it. So it's very little, yeah. And then during the recalculation, if you do this recalculation from, this is another example, if you found large birds and small birds, we have definition. Large bird is larger than a wood pigeon or a pigeon, and small bird is everything like thrush and smaller like that. Bat is bat. And if you found 6 large birds, after recalculation, there should be about 60 large birds. And if you found 37 small birds after recalculation, it could be about 308 small birds in that area. And from 27 bats, you can have around 225 bats. But in the new proposed version, we do not be needed this recalculation, because then we were against that, but our authorities was supporting another methodology, just to do a calculation from what we found, just on this first top, without recalculation. It has sense and it has negative, because if you look on this top, you know the species exactly what you found. And then if you do a calculation, you just can say large animal, small animal, but you cannot say 10 times more common buzzard, 10 times more white storks. You just can say it could be geese or whatever. And it's the same with the small birds. With the bats, maybe it's a different story, because all the bat species is considered as significant, and then it's no matter which species of bats. In that wind farm, 25, for example, mollards, it wouldn't be a problem if you have looking, not maybe that, but 10 mollards or whatever, if you're having hunting bag, etc. in mind. Yeah, so it's controversial, it's still under discussion, and then you can see the graph when we find these animals, bats in orange, birds in yellow, not yellow, it's blue. And you can see that there is in all wind farms, we don't have almost non-collision of bats during the June when they grow the juveniles. I think we had 1 or 2 collision. So, but definitely there is spring migration, and definitely there is very much more intense autumn migration. So how it looks, what is the results, a bit how it's done. So if you do a screening, impact assessment, you have these vantage points, coverage, etc. Flights, you make these lines on the GIS, usually we use tablets. And then, yeah, we have these points, etc. And you have the maps, and then we calculate to the density of birds. For example, this is just few birds of prey. Leather spotted eagle is in orange, marsh harrier yellow, and the common buzzard is in blue. And then if you make this recalculation of the density of the birds, but also remember that there is also effect of the observation point. So if you stand closer, you have more. If your distribution is even, we don't try to stand on the borders of these 2 kilometers because our interest not the outlines of the wind farm, but in the area actually. Then is the flight analysis, corridors, for example, where the birds is flying, geese or passerine birds, shorter lines, geese, longer lines, and so on. Another point is the sensitive flights. We estimate the flight height. And if you look to the birds of prey, majority of them, more than 50% are using this flight. So each line we draw, we estimate the height. And then I looked at the GPS data and what data we had. Actually, it was 10-20% from somewhere in between them, what we assume and what is the real data. And we consider leather spotted eagle one of the most sensitive species. And you can see here, it's mostly flying in this sensitive zone, always, almost. So it's could be the reason why it is so much in this affected. So another white-tailed eagle flies a lot, crane sometimes, but we had, in my life experience of almost 20 years in the wind farm, we had one collision of crane. Even there is flying thousands of them, mostly they have avoidance. If they're large wind farm, they just glide over. During breeding season, they successfully grow juveniles on there, and it was a juvenile on autumn migration, so I don't think that the crane could be a sensitive species. White stork, it's a different story. Then another thing is the collision risk models. That is new for us and started a couple years ago. It's usually based on the EFC requirements, and so we can make assessments if you collect the proper data. So you need to collect a data of that scale like you have on GIS, and you have to have a time, how long the bird was flying. Enter the VTG parameters, wingspan, the rotor size, and then you can recalculate of your data how much these 40 hours per vantage point, what did you observe during the season, what you're getting later, what you're having in wind farm. For example, there was a risk assessment collision for the lifespan of 20-30 years for wind farm of 40 VTGs, one of the largest now. And it was estimated if you don't take any mitigation measures each bird has avoidance level. So even the birds of prey, golden plovers, etc., you can see by official data, this is how much they avoid. Even that is not, some of them not helping. Even these 2% may cause the risk. So you put these from your 100 flights, 2 flights would be through that area. And you have these numbers of collision risk, for example, for the black-eyed one, because it was few of them observed, white-tailed eagle 39, and then harrier 65, etc., and so on. But it's model, and what we see from the reality, it's a bit different, and it's not correspond what is actually it is. So, but this data you can get if you have a correct data, and this sometimes helps you. Okay, you can say this is 60 birds per year I can kill if I will not take any measures. If I would install this, I will remove that wind farm, I will do that. My collision risk would be like 2 birds per 3 years or something, and then you can get approval. At least this is how the system working in United States. So you do that, and you say what you will be implementing, and then they're giving you reduce from that to that. This is our layout of the sensitive bird search. So we have these zones, these forests, so you search them during the non-breeding season. Then you observe the flights of the birds during breeding season, and then you mark them in the radius of different, so 2 kilometers was at the beginning, now 3, maybe in the next legislation it would be 4 kilometers. And then you have map of planet VTGs and map of the sensitive bird species. And then you start looking where to put these in the area, those VTGs, you moving them from one to another. But this is one of the main criteria to make the decisions. Then you see that there is not so much space actually. We have a lot of criticism from the authorities, from the environmental, and sometimes I feel that I'm in that position, that I'm not good for the clients, developers, I'm not good for the conservationists, because I'm saying that there is a place to build and you might build if you will set that and that. But they're saying, no, you have to go to the area where there is no birds, there is more safe. Just a couple examples I want to show you from the planet VTGs or already developed VTGs, or how it looks like in Lithuania if you make a proper assessment. These circles go from the red zone, etc., or it's existing. So another example. Show me a place where is no impact zone, and now the very environmental activists, they want to make these zones up to 5-7 kilometers, these yellow zones. And in that case, you would be forced almost to stand in another wind farm to observe another wind farm effect, because they are located not so far away. And in that case, it would make, so just showing how it is with the nest, white storks, black storks, they have the largest circle, etc. There is some places in very open landscapes of south or middle parts of Lithuania. There is very few spots where you can find place without any of these circles. But then, yes, you calculate these distances, and then basically you have a table, and it's very clear if you go to one zone or another, what you want to do. You want to move the VTG, or you want to go to another zone. And even it's 401 meter, we usually say, okay, move 30 meters. It would be more sense than 1 meter difference of the blade. So if you, yeah. Then the staging bird census, nothing special, making circles, then putting all together for the analysis. A bit about bat monitoring, and then I see that I'm going to the end soon for the questions. I have to leave some time. Yeah, so bat monitoring. So we have this one night monitoring of bat activity index. We started to use that last year, per location, per season, and per different months or census from the one night stand detectors. Then we have standalone all-season detectors, and then you have each night activity of the bats. And you can see how it changes. If it's in the beginning more, so it's green, it's non-sensitive species. There is a bit of them. We never found any collision. They are not in the conflict with the VTGs. There is medium class. There might be sensitive, and there is the red one, actually the largest group. They fly high. Great noctule, common pipistrelle, Natusus pipistrelle, part-colored bat. Those are sensitive, and you can see the activity of them through each day, what is the period, so on and so on. So this makes a lot of sense for us for the compensation. And then if you put to these graphs, you can have a clear, this is time, and there is the dates, and you can see the activity of the bats. And this is the lines. This is the sun go down, and then is the sunrise. And you can see that the bat activity doesn't start from the sun going down. It starts 1 hour after. So you can implement your mitigation, saying not 1 after that, but even you save 20 hours per mid-operation season, so you have 24 hours per wind turbine, per wind farm, so you can save a little bit, and still bats can be safe. Another, more or less, it's not in the legislation, but it's our initiative to do a little bit of tracking of these sensitive birds of species, evaluating them before, during, and during construction and during the operational phase. So we have around 50 lesser spotted eagles, about 30 marsh harriers, about 60 common buzzards, and up to 10 honey buzzards tracked. Lots of them are dead. This winter was surprisingly high mortality for common buzzards. More than 50% didn't survive this winter. So it's not only VTGs affecting, you can know a lot of additional information, even how many of them are shot or killed illegally on the migration route and where it happens. But then you can have also very fine data, how they behave in the wind farm and around the VTGs, where they fly. And this is the case of 2 lesser spotted eagles. One was further nesting bird, and another started to nest during the construction actually phase. So he was flying around. Sadly, this yellow one was avoiding 2 years. The nest from the wind turbine was 250 meters, and he was successfully breeding 2 years there, and he killed by anthropogenic impact by shooting them in the Lebanon during the migration. So it was not the wind turbine who killed, but it was migration, illegal hunting. Then the home ranges, usually you have this circle of the nest, but it's not always that one who is really representing the home range of the bird. For example, there is the nest, and if you had a planning stage, you said, okay, this is the nest and this is the circle of these 2 kilometers. But on other hand, bird of prey people know that the reason why there is not flying to another part, because there is another bird of the prey sitting in another area. So it's not that effect of that, but a multiple effect. There is an example of the common buzzard. He's still alive, so surprisingly. Nest less than about kilometer from the wind turbine before, and you can see there is almost no changes in the home range. So we're now analyzing the data of the other birds, how it was before, during, and after, but it's very hard, needs a lot of time to look on these, what is happening and how the birds affect. This is the example of the nest of this yellow bird, and you can see that there is, sometimes there is no avoidance of the territory. They will not drop if you will build the wind farms there. But what they do, they will have this micro-avoidance around the VTGs, around the wind turbine blades. So if you calculate all these roads and these construction stages, you can have around 40 acres, something like that, of the area where they will not use probably so intensively. Also, sadly, but it's the reality, some of the birds has collision, and then you can have, even from this GPS trackers, you can look very carefully and very specific on you can reconstruct the VTG location, VTG orientation, and where the bird was flying, what happened when it was the collision, for example. And you can see, because it's measuring each second. Yeah, so it's, I'm going to the end, and this is also from each wind farm. We prepare mitigation plan, nature enrichment plan if it's necessary, or compensation measures, what is needed, restoration, additional nesting platforms, breeding platforms, and so on. Then we have some very strange or not always right approach of investigation. For example, lesser spotted eagles, they have large distance from each other, and the wind turbine is planned to adjust accordingly to the turbines, where move further away from the nest. However, after construction, the unoccupied territories of the lesser spotted eagles, for example, you did investigation and there is no breeding lesser spotted eagles around. But we have adverse effect, and we have much more stronger effect there, where there was no nest, because this empty territory is scavenged by immature birds and looked very oftenly. And we have a larger mortality. There is no nests, actually. There is nests, and they protect this territory. And there is less abundant number of birds around. But this free territory is attracting immature birds. And there is a study shows that immature birds, they're more effective to the collision of wind turbines, because they don't know this territory so effectively, so good. Another, during the construction there is new bird coming and starting to nest, or operational phase, what to do then if they are in this red zone. Some of them, they survive very good and long period, and on others, there is some collision after 3 years even of that. There could be solutions, what we think now, maybe not 10 years ago, but now there is mitigation measures with this technological solution, video system-based IE technologies of identification of birds, ultrasonic bat monitoring and shutdown of VTGs based on the bat activity around the rotor area. And will it help? Probably the time will show, but we see already some first implementation in Lithuania, and it shows it's efficient, it's working. And so in the yellow zone, you can build if the VTG, if it has this technological mitigation measures. And so it's for the planning. Operational stage, what we got, it's different. You cannot go with the planning stage in the red zone. But if you have already operating wind farm, you are already your investments and everything you did. So it's not that the coming eagle or someone erected white stork platform closer than 400 meters and the stork nested there and it can close the wind turbine. So they say you have to implement these technological mitigation measures and additional mitigation measures, stopping, for example, during the field work and so on. So maximize or additional cameras attached to the VTGs that are in the red zone, because it will happen. So first implementation of this protect bird cameras last season in few wind farms in Lithuania. So we have a close collaboration with them for the verifying and for the monitoring in the wind farms. And then we have implementation of, not implementation, but also we going probably on the testing on the systems of smart systems on bats monitoring, because now we have this regulation of 10 degrees. If it's above 10 degrees, wind is less than 6 meters, shut down the VTG for that and that period during that. But if you have this IE-based system, you can operate a bit maybe smarter. And there is just an example of free close-by nesting leather-spotted eagles, and you can see clearly there is 2 more. It's not ringed, not attached. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you for the input. We have quite many questions. I tried to read some of them. So, question from the audience. Do the threshold values for dead birds and bats reflect the number of animals physically found, or is the number of dead estimated as a result of calculations during follow-up monitoring?
So basically, we now in the reports we give 2 numbers. This is what is actually found and what is estimated for large and small. So, but we cannot go for the birds. For the birds, the species level, and for the bats, we just count this as a general number of bats. But we provide now both numbers, estimated, corrected version, and the real found carcass.
So what happens with the data of registered fatalities? Do you analyze the impact for the whole Lithuania?
No, we do not analyze for the whole Lithuania. We provide this data to the authorities, and we have this legislation. This fatality number was calculated from the population level, when it could be considered significant to the population level if each wind farm, but it was developed 15 years ago, almost 10 years ago, when there was smaller number of VTGs, and now we see the situation is changing. But generally, it might be that they have, I think it would be necessary to have some kind of generalized evaluation on the species level of impact.
Mm-hmm. Question: are all Lithuanian wind farms developments inventoried by the same team, 35 to 40 people?
No, we working, at least our people working in maybe 30% of the VTGs. Others are working. There is a couple more companies working on other sites for the evaluation.
Do we understand correctly that the map of environmentally sensitive areas in Lithuania is not updated on an ongoing basis?
Yes.
As environmental data is added?
Yes, it's all data. So it's what I showed. It's data from 2017-18, and it's not updated. And when I said it's still, you put a lot of investments, and I'm a bit skeptical. Even we have a paper on that, how it's usually it helps at that. But actually, if I would be developer, even if it's red or green zone, I would go to another area where there is a grid. I will not build a wind farm far distance. And this is what is the weak point of this map. So it make you show that you go into risky zone, but then you have to make maybe better investigation, etc. But this map doesn't show that you cannot go. It's just showing that it's very risky for you to go. Maybe you will have more mitigation measures, etc. of the species what was found there, or sensitive protected areas what is close by. So it would be maybe good for updating, but when we had now this optimized and strategically the same method of the investigation, this problem more or less dissolved, because everyone has to follow these rules. So many vantage points, so many observation hours, etc. And then you have the same level of investigation. Before that, it was one is doing that, another doing that, and you have to do that, and then we have problems now with the old wind farms that had been evaluated by old methods and constructed now. And when you start to do a monitoring, you see totally different picture. It's like upside down, and it's sometimes very hard.
So how is the avoidance of cumulative impacts on migratory species ensured?
Migratory species, mostly what we see, we don't see a lot. We see only one species that was changing the road or a little bit flying differently. It was common cranes, migrating common cranes from the roosting or migratory, when they have to a barrier effect, so they have low over or around. Geese, swans, and ducks, they just go through this, like through the microphones, and the number of them sitting and collision and avoidance. Just now we have a wind farm with 26,000 geese under VTGs, roosting, flying over.
The question, does the data collected by Lithuania indicate how high a wind turbine was where the bat or bird was found? Is there any species dependence on the height of the wind turbine?
We haven't looked on the specific, but what we can see that the old version of the VTG is like 2 megawatts, 2.1 megawatts, and what is now this large Enercon, not Enercon, but Nordex, G, etc. We found more bats under new VTGs with the larger. It's not the height, but it could be also a swept area. It's not even higher, but it's larger. So if you have this and you have that, so in all dimensions, so it's much more larger area.
In the planning of the Estonian wind farms, the public is also concerned about the effects of the microclimate changes or accumulation of microplastics or harmful effects of low-frequency noise on living organisms. Are these possible effects taken into account in planning in Lithuania as well?
No, but we have heard this from the Lithuanian audience about these effects, also how you evaluate, etc. In our case, we haven't seen a difference of the number of moles or earthworms around, or the cows stop producing milk. Actually, some of the cows, they benefit having a shadow roosting during the hot summer days. You can see 20 cows are lying in this shadow of the VTG. But there is questions. There is some studies on some roe deers of the noise effect or the other wild animals, but we haven't recorded any significant effect or seen adverse effect or microplastic or something.
We are on time, exactly. It's really good to be on time. Thank you for the thorough input, and
Thank you.
give a round of applause for Julius. Aitäh!